episode reacting to the Tom Pelissero report that either the Vikings and or Kirk likely aren't going to come together on another 1-year contract. That's either going to be all or nothing, a multi-year, or they're going to play out the last year. So you can definitely check that out. Let's get in later on here to some things that we learned from the reaction to that episode. But over on SI.com, the Inside the Vikings Fan Nation section of SI.com, Will Raggett, who does a good job covering the team, I follow him on Twitter, and he's constantly riding the roller coaster of Minnesota sports, so you can follow him. And he has an article laying out some of the potential targets in free agency the Vikings could look at that mesh with Brian Flores, guys that Brian Flores has coached before. We've gone over some of these names on Purple Daily, but a new name just joined this list, and I think it's worth highlighting here with you guys. So the Washington Commanders released veteran defensive back Bobby McCain on Monday, and Will writes, the Vikings could be a logical landing spot for the versatile safety and slot cornerback. That's right. He's sort of a hybrid safety in the box slot cornerback type. And he can actually, because he was released, he can actually sign any time in the next 2 weeks before the league year opens up. If you get released, Derek Carr, for instance, can just go sign. He could sign tomorrow with somebody. So there's some other names on this list. But, man, a guy like Bobby McCain, so former fifth-round pick, he was in that Flores defense in Miami. He was drafted by Miami in 2015. 5'9", 196 with 4.51 speed. So you wouldn't put him on the outside, but he could play some safety, some slot cornerback. And he grades out well according to PFF. As a coverage guy, he's had grades around 70 in coverage out of 100 the last 2 years. And this is the thing that I think maybe solves a couple problems all in one. Some safety depth, but also last year he played 404 snaps in the slot, 350 snaps at free safety, and then another 195 just in the box. The year before that in Miami, he played almost exclusively as a free safety, but 100 snaps in the slot. So I'll just start there. Like, if you can get a veteran guy like him, and he's 29 years old, which is a little old, but you're probably looking for like a 1 or 2 year stopgap until you cultivate some young players. Bobby McCain, an interesting name to keep an eye on, Judd.
He's the type of guy that I probably would give a reasonable contract to and not make promises, but he could for sure compete. His skill set is intriguing. You don't see a lot of guys who are safeties who can play in the nickel in the corner there as well. So that's the type of guy that I would, if he and Flores are friendly and he knows Brian Flores' system, which he clearly does, I would certainly give him a shot. He's also the type of guy I think you sign with no assurances. So like, he doesn't solve your problems, but he's got a chance to help with them.
That's a fair way to characterize. That's what you would do? Yeah.
Well, I would bring him here on a 1-year contract and say, you can compete, and there's a good chance because you'll come in ahead of the system because you've played in it, so you'll be certainly more progressed than some players. So I would, but I mean, it would have to be on my terms. So like, if teams bid, I'd probably be like, okay, here's what we're offering you. Here's the opportunity. If you choose to go to the Bears or something, that's fine too.
A name that we threw out on Purple Daily last week that Will also throws out here on his SI.com article, 5'11", 188-pound. He's a cornerback, but kind of a slot outside hybrid, Cameron Sutton, who spent the last few years under Mike Tomlin with Pittsburgh. But, Brian Flores worked with that defense too in 2022 with the Steelers. Former third-round pick, drafted in 2017. Just another, in terms of like how he grades out on PFF, just rock solid. There's a couple flaws here in terms of like there's some missed tackle problems maybe with him, but he played the last 3 years. He has played a total of 700 snaps in the slot combined the last 3 years, and then the rest of the snaps mostly outside corner. But he's also mixed in with, like last year he played 10 snaps at free safety, so they can kind of move him all over the place. And he's a little younger. He's a year and a half younger at age 28. PFF says $8 to $9 million on a 2 or 3 year contract,
which I'd be fine with. I think that guy is more of the type of guy that you're probably going to target because he's going to cost more clearly, so it's not going to be a cheap endeavor. But like that strikes me as the type of guy who you would sign with the direct intention to start either outside or the slot. So he would get more guarantees, and I'd be comfortable with that. But that is the exact type of guy that I think could alleviate you from feeling like you're absolutely positively obligated to draft a corner in the first round. Don't you?
Yes, I think so. Although it depends. Like, do you look at a guy like Sutton? Here's another name I'll throw out here that's on Will's list, and Sutton is the 3rd ranked cornerback on the PFF list. The next guy is the 4th ranked cornerback on the PFF list, Jonathan Jones from New England. He's 29 years old. Some of these 28, 29-year-old guys, those are just 1 or 2 year stopgaps. Yes. Might not prevent you from, if you thought there was a stud in the first round that could come in at age 21 or 22, 6'2", 200 pound, a Joey Porter Jr. type guy.
Yes.
I don't know that it would preclude you from drafting that player, but Jonathan Jones, another guy, he's 5'10", 190. He spent a lot of time in the slot his first few years in New England. Last year, he was almost exclusively an outside cornerback, but when he was in the slot, he was one of the better slot cornerbacks in the league in that same Bill Belichick 3-4 system. So another guy to keep an eye on there.
I actually think too, and we talked about this last week as well, I think the discussion about what they're going to do in the slot is way more important and deserves more attention than it gets. Because you know what? If you're going to develop, so let's say that you think, or you're banking on, perhaps mistakenly, that Andrew Booth Jr. is finally going to play. He's not going to get hurt. He's finally going to be healthy, and that there's a very good chance that he can win a starting job to start the season. And keep in mind, they traded up for him in the 2nd round, so that was with the intention of him playing a lot. Andrew Booth is going to play outside. And if you look at the majority of guys on their roster, if you're going to develop them, they're outside guys. The slot is a weird position. It's why guys can now be like corners, slot, but they're a safety too. And so I think among the most important things that is barely being focused on is the fact that replacing Shannon Sullivan is huge. Because if you're not good in the slot, like look at the guys who line up in the slot now, or at least occasionally. Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, they'll be in the slot, then they're out. So like it's no longer this, we can cover that guy. It is now one of the, and the slot also provides challenges just as far as the schematics because of where you're playing at. That is much different. So you can't just say, well, Booth looks like he's good outside, so I bet he's good inside. We've seen that before, and it can be extremely dangerous and a really bad assumption.
And this
I like this idea.
It's a defense too that you're going to play more man coverage, so it's even more imperative. You're not just going to be able to sort of zone scheme your way. Not that worked for the Vikings last year either. The middle of the field was just a gaping desert. So, but it's even more important if you're going to play a lot of man coverage to have a guy in the slot that can keep up with some of the receivers that you just mentioned sprinkled around the league. So those are just some names that you want to read the full piece. Will Ragetz kind of lays out. He even lays out some linebackers. Eric Rowe is another option as kind of a safety cornerback hybrid. But these are some of the names that are probably going to pop up starting in about 2 weeks once the legal tampering period officially opens up, as the Vikings look to fix one of the worst defenses in the NFL.
My guess too, when it comes to the real free agent cornerback class, I think those top 3 or 4 guys are going to get paid substantially. So like that's where you're going to have to create room. Like if you want to compete, and I'm not saying call them up and say, okay, what's it going to take? I'm saying call them up with numbers in mind that are going to be expensive. That's the thing is, because I mean, every year free agency contracts start to leak, and there's certain positions I think that we're just perpetually surprised by. Oh my God, this guy got that. Cornerback is one of them. So it's going to be, if you're going to get one guy, it's going to cost you.
Yeah. Is there any scenario in which you guys would bring Patrick Peterson back?
Dex, go ahead.
Yeah.
PFF projects 1 year, $5 million for him.
That's good with me. I don't think you can be in the business to overpay for him and give him a multi-year deal. And I know he had basically a renaissance last year where he legit was one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL. I can't commit to that at a position where the age cliff just falls completely off. I think it's probably more likely, right? He looks more like the Patrick Peterson in his first season with the Vikings than last season. So 1 year, $5 million, yeah, sign me up, no problem. But I can't be strong-armed into doing a multi-year deal. And if Pat P feels like, well, because I'm coming off a big year, I want to go big payday, I would go see him. I would tell him thanks and go find that for you.
I think Pat P is a tremendously valuable guy. I think he is a guy that has seen a ton. I think he's a guy that can definitely help your young corners. But keep in mind, Patrick Peterson was one of the few people in the Ed Donatel scheme who benefited from it. Lots of zone. When he played man, it became dicey. So, no. I've got to move on because if I'm going to play the type of scheme, I think I'm going to... Like, the Renaissance came from the system, which again is weird because the system failed almost everybody else. But I don't think I can ask Peterson to play the aggressive, you're on an island by yourself defense at this point. Back 8 years ago, absolutely. Lights out. Unbelievable. But I've got to have quicker, more athletic, younger guys who can stick with receivers, or else I feel like if we open the season with Patrick Peterson at the left corner and it's against the Packers again, Christian Watson's not going to drop that ball, and that's how you're going to start.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at the five guys who are on the wrong side of 30 from that defense last year. Zadarius Smith, Jordan Hicks, Eric Kendricks, Patrick Peterson, Harrison Smith. There's five guys, half your defense over the age of 30. I am 100% saying goodbye to the linebackers. Respectfully, Eric Kendricks, awesome Vikings career. You're welcome back anytime to come hang out. I'm getting rid of both linebackers. That leaves three guys. So I'm getting younger, faster at those positions. Zadarius, Patrick Peterson, Harrison Smith. Now, Peterson is a free agent, so it's not just up to you.
Right.
I'm keeping one of those guys for sure because I want to keep some veteran leadership in there. You could maybe twist my arm into keeping two. But of those three guys I just listed that are left, Harrison Smith is my number. I want to keep Harrison Smith. I know that he's a safety and he's overpaid. Maybe you can get him to take a pay cut, but
right.
I really want to see him in Flores' system, and I think he's a great leader. So among Zadarius and Patrick Peterson, I think I'm probably ranking Zadarius ahead of Patrick Peterson if I were to keep a second one of those guys. But I wouldn't be opposed to just saying goodbye to almost everyone over the age of 30 and getting younger faster and avoid the age cliff.
So I would prefer to sit Harrison down and actually say, hey, you know what? Lifelong Viking, still a lot to give. Can we get your salary down? But you know what? He's the one guy, Phil, of all of the positions that you went through where savvy is probably more important than speed. Safeties don't have to be fast. Safeties have to be incredibly smart.
I mean, could Peterson be a safety at some point? I don't think there's room for that here because you already have your old aging safety.
We always talk, years ago, Charles Woodson near the end of his career moved. And we always talk about that now. Well, this guy was a really good corner. Could he be a safety?
Yeah.
And you know what? Perhaps. I don't know. I don't care. I need speed, and Peterson has to be fast. Harrison does not. The Zadarius thing that scares me is, especially at his current salary, is he was really good for about 9 games and then fell off a cliff. And that was a year after he didn't play. And so if I'm ranking this by what do I need from you athletically as well, Harrison Smith is the one guy who I think I can be okay, I'm fine there still. But Pat P, I can't. Zadarius scares me. And to your point, the linebackers, I can't watch a repeat of that.
No, it's the linebacker thing is it's the easiest decision on the team, right? Just to say goodbye to the two linebackers.
Well, how frustrating
younger,
is that
cheaper,
to watch?
faster.
Just as fans or just from the press box. It was the same all the time. And I'm sure Ed didn't help those guys, but you got to have more speed there in 2023.
Yeah. One way to get more speed and get younger is the draft.
I want a mock!
And I have in front of you guys, it's a 2-round mock draft update from PFF.com, Pro Football Focus. Now, the Vikings don't have a second-round pick, so these 2-round mocks are kind of useless for us, other than just to see which players fall into the second round. But this mock draft update, which we do these across Mackey and Judd and Purple Daily, we've done about 20 of them. Half the mocks in the first round have the Vikings drafting a cornerback. And that's because last year, opposing offenses were slicing and dicing the Vikings defense unlike old Macadac, who suffers from dull knives. It's embarrassing.
It is.
I can't even slice and dice a tomato with my old knives without squishing them and having juice fly all over the place. I was telling Kyle on Flagrant Howls yesterday, I like to make homemade sweet potato fries. They're healthier. You can control the ingredients in them. Good luck with the dull knives we had before we discovered mydullknives.com. Cutting a sweet potato. It's just embarrassing. You walk around, people are pointing, laughing at you. Look at that. I bet that guy has dull knives.
Yummy.
Just looks like a guy that has dull knives. mydullknives.com, where the folks at Vivront will send you a safe and professional mail kit. You can send your dull knives on a little vacation to go get sharpened professionally. All of you have knives. They're likely dull, and I'm guessing none of you have had them sharpened before. It's an innovative, fascinating experience that will heighten your confidence and experience in the kitchen. mydullknives.com. Tell them that SKOR North sent you so we can get the full credit too. mydullknives.com.
Sweet potato fries, you said?
Oh, yep.
No, I mean, it sounds great. I love it. That's creative.
Air
That's
fryer.
good.
Little so
Dawn does some
slice up
great
the sweet
stuff in the air fryer.
potatoes, a little olive oil, little garlic pepper mix, and throw them in the air fryer for about a half hour.
That sounds
Boom.
delicious.
So good. You can do it in the oven too, but we're an air fryer family.
Yeah.
At the Mackies.
See, we use both. Well, I shouldn't say we. That's a bunch of BS. Dawn uses both.
We knew
I
when the
clean
words
the
came out of
dishes.
your mouth.
That's all I do. I clean the dishes and sometimes serve as a sous chef. That's it.
Here's the mock from PFF. The Colts trade up for the number 1 pick, and they land Bryce Young. It doesn't say what the trade is, but the Colts have traded up for the number 1 pick.
And Bryce Young is the only one of the top quarterback prospects not throwing at the combine, right, Declan? Didn't we see that on the crawl yesterday?
I thought they said he was throwing at the combine.
I think Bryce Young is not throwing. I think everybody else, I think all the rest of the top prospects are throwing, which is interesting because ordinarily,
won't throw at the combine.
Ordinarily, about 3 guys don't throw.
Right.
CJ Stroud to the Texans, number 2.
Okay.
Now we have the Panthers trading up to number 3 to draft Anthony Richardson.
Oh, that's the Trey Lance pick then, huh?
Yeah,
Like going up and poaching the guy that we're not sure about.
Yeah, it doesn't say what the trade is, but it says they're trading up to number 3. And then the Bears in the 4 slot now take Jalen Carter. Seahawks take Will Anderson Jr. The Lions take the first cornerback off the board, Christian Gonzalez from Oregon. And then Will Levis goes 7 to the Raiders. So the 4 quarterbacks off the board in the first 7 picks.
I like that pick there.
Let's keep scrolling here. You got the cornerback. You got Devin Witherspoon coming off the board at 9. You got some offensive tackles. First receiver off the board, the Texans at 12. Quentin Johnston from TCU. Zay Flowers, the second receiver off the board of the Patriots at 14. Joey Porter Jr. gone at 16 to the Commanders. Brian Branch, the Alabama defensive back, to the Lions at 18. Nolan Smith, edge rusher to the Buccaneers at 19. JSN from Ohio State, the third receiver off the board, 20 to the Seahawks. Let's get to the Vikings here. On the clock at 23, and according to PFF.com, they select cornerback Deonte Banks out of Maryland. Wow. PFF and Kuiper both have Deonte Banks going to the Brian Flores system. The write-up says 6'2", 205-pound Banks stands out as a man coverage outside cornerback. He does lack consistency when it comes to mirroring off-press coverage. Football. But when he's in sync, he's one of the best cover cornerbacks in the class. The Vikings need to invest in a player like that on the outside. The bottom line says Banks has all the physical traits of an all-pro cornerback. He just needs to be more consistent with his technique. Brian Flores can hopefully help with that.
Who else is left in the first round? Like, who goes after that?
Jordan Addison and Michael Mayer, the receiver and tight end prospects, are the next 2 picks. Bijan Robinson to the Cowboys. Guard Osiris Torrance from Florida goes 27. Anton Harrison, the tackle from Oklahoma, goes 28. Edge rusher Miles Murphy from Clemson goes 29. Defensive tackle, edge are 30 and 31.
I don't
And
think
then some familiar names that you like. So Kelly Ringo in the second round, Emmanuel Forbes, second round, Drew Sanders, the linebacker, second round.
Ringo in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, especially if I can address it in free agency, I don't think Jordan Addison's getting past me if I'm the Vikings.
I would not hate that.
That is very intriguing for me. Young, team-controlled receiver. I could plug him in, I would hope, as the 2. Like, if you don't think that he's the 2, then I guess I would defer. But if he is as advertised by many, he could step in for Thielen immediately. I mean, clearly KJ in their world is not that guy. I think I'd have to go that way.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the draft is going to shape up so much more because in the next 2 weeks, they're going to make roster moves and then they're going to sign free agents. And so in a month from now, this is going to become so much more crystal clear. By the way, John Michael Schmitz, the Minnesota center, 47 to the Commanders. So he goes mid-second round. And then there's a kind of a run on centers. Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin goes 53. I thought the Michigan kid was in here, but he's not in the first round. So there you go. There's your mock draft roundup updates on Mackey and Judd. Good show today, guys. Declan with a great Twins pecking order. If they can do all those things, I think they'll be in good shape. And some interesting names for the Vikings to target with Brian Flores connections. Tomorrow, write that down, predictions, and an accountability session on both Mackey and Judd and Purple Daily. Thank you, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.